Bosma just released the G1, an 8K micro Four Thirds camera. That's right, I said that right. The third 8K camera released since 2020, but the first ever micro Four Thirds camera capable of 8K. This and more after the intro. Thanks for tuning in to The Ordinary Filmmaker. Just before I get to today's news, please like this video. The more likes the video gets, the more likely I'm to publish other videos of this type. And one last thing before I get to today's news, I just launched the Night Challenge. Shoot a video at night, and you could win a brand new Zhiyun Weebill-S and an Ordinary Filmmaker baseball cap. Contest ends May 14th. Watch this video here for more details. And now for the news. The Bosma G1 8K camera uses a micro Four Thirds sensor. Now, if you think back, you might remember that Sharp has teased us about their micro Four Thirds 8K stills hybrid camera in 2019, then again in 2020, but we've yet to see any camera come to market, although they did just recently remind us that they're still working on it. Well, Bosma's no longer working. They have the G1, which they say is a 33 megapixel sensor with a resolution of 7680 by 4320. Now that's UHD 8K resolution. And I know what you're thinking. If it does 8K on a 33 megapixel sensor, well, then the sensor must have a 16:9 aspect ratio. Because, well, it's not possible to do 8K video on a 4:3 aspect ratio that's common with a micro Four Thirds sensor if the resolution is 33 megapixels. Now, the Canon R5 uses a 45 megapixel sensor using a standard 35mm aspect ratio for a full frame sensor, and it's 45 megapixels in order to deliver DCI 8K. But there's one thing. They report that the sensor does have a 4:3 aspect ratio. Now, I am using Google Translate to translate some of these settings, but it clearly says it is a Four Thirds sensor. This doesn't make sense to me. It's like something's missing. They're not giving us the full picture. How can we provide 8K video at a 16:9 aspect ratio or 17:9 aspect ratio with a 33 megapixel sensor? To me, the math just doesn't add up, at least from the information we're given at least. Now, Sony did announce a 47 megapixel micro Four Thirds sensor in 2019, and it's capable of recording 8K video at up to 30 frames per second. Now, this is what's rumored to be in the Panasonic GH6. Is Bosma using the new 47 megapixel multi-aspect ratio sensor? The new sensor that records 8K video up to 30 frames per second in 17:9 aspect mode, and in 4:3 mode drops to 25p, or frames per second. But anyhow, enough math. There just simply isn't enough information here, and I'm just conjecturing, speculating, and I don't know the full picture. At least that's what it seems like. I mean, how else can you do 8K on a 33 megapixel sensor unless it has a 16 or 17:9 aspect ratio? Now, as soon as more details come out, I'll let you know. Now, the real problem for me, though, is not that it can do 8K on a 33 megapixel sensor. It's that it can deliver 8K at 24, 25, and 30 frames per second, and does so at 200 megabits per second. Now, if I was going to spend $5,000 on an 8K camera, I'd really want more options. I'd want at least all eye, let alone RAW, and I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. The Sony Alpha 1 can deliver very good, detailed 8K UHD video at 400 megabits per second, and it also has an option for 200 megabits. And megabits, let me say that properly, megabits. And it looks good, and it works for many people, and it provides an awful lot of detail, but many professionals demand a minimum of all eye or even RAW when shooting in 4K, 8K, or even Full HD. Now let's put this into perspective. The Canon R5 can do 2,600 megabits per second in 8K RAW, 1,300 megabits per second in all eye, and still a staggering 680 million bits per second in IPB. But the bigger question for us is how well can a micro Four Thirds sensor deliver 8K video when compressed to this degree? And I'm really curious to find out. Perhaps the industry's found a way to compress video, well, compress the daylights out of video and deliver high quality 8K out of a small sensor like micro Four Thirds.
And this is a universal lossless compression engine. Text, audio, video.
Yes, that is correct.
Unlike the clip from Silicon Valley, this isn't lossless, but when editing, having more detail is always better. Other details of the camera include that it records in 10-bit, it can do 4K, 24, 25, and 30 frames per second at 100 megabits per second. Oh, and one more thing, it supports HDMI 2.1. This means it's capable of delivering 8K video right off the sensor, allowing it to deliver much higher bit rates and thus more detail. Maybe saving this camera. What do you think? What do you think of the Bosma G1? Are you curious? I didn't see any still specifications, so maybe this is a video-centric camera, or maybe it's their version of a cinema camera. The video that came along with this is from a Japanese company that's in charge of marketing it or distributing it, and it's a little bit low rent. As you can see here, they've got a green screen in the back, and, well, actually, they're just projecting the video right over top of the people and the background. So we definitely need to see more coming out on this camera. I'm really curious about it, but one thing is certain. 8K is fast becoming a video standard, video format, whether we like it or not. I'm really curious to see what this camera is going to deliver. I'm really curious because up until about, well, the start of this year, I really had no need for 8K. I'd shot it a few times last year just to deliver some reviews to you guys, but to me, using it, I just didn't see the point to it. The storage required alone was just unbelievable. But then I was bored one day and I thought, what can I do for a video? And I went outside and I shot in 8K. Then I came back to the studio and I also shot in 8K. And the final result was stunning. Now the studio stuff, who cares? I could have shot it in 4K IPB and nobody really would have noticed much of a difference. It wouldn't have, shooting me in 8K doesn't give you any extra value. But when I went outside and I shot the snow falling off the tree branches at -7 Celsius with the sun using high dynamic range 8K all-eye, well, the level of detail was just jaw-dropping. It was like I was watching something on an IMAX or something that David Attenborough had put out. It truly was shocking, the level of detail that I was able to get. Now, granted, the files were huge. This was a 10-minute video, and the project size was, are you ready for this? 500 gigabytes for 10 minutes. Now that's the project size, so that's everything. The actual outputted, and I output in H.265, 20 gigabytes. Might have been 21, might have been 19, but it was right around 20 gigabytes. So it was definitely huge. And that's a problem, but that's one of the things if you're going to work with these higher resolutions, 8K and 4K, and if you want to capture all that detail, if you're shooting naturescapes, if you're shooting outside and you want that detail, well, then a highly compressed format to me isn't going to work unless, of course, like in Silicon Valley, they're able to produce a high detail, much compressed file that's lossless. In other words, you're not losing, tossing out any information. And I can't see going all the way down to 200 megabits in 8K as delivering that lossless, that level of detail. Anyhow, thanks so much for watching. That's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe for your chance to win 2 Angelbird 128GB AV Pro MK2 V90 SD cards, along with a dual UHS2 card reader. Or you could also win a Ulanzi LED light package with an accent light, underwater light, and various other flat panel lights to help light your subject, or as a really good starter kit for someone starting their own channel. And if you do want to support this channel, please use my affiliate links to B&H and Amazon, and you could also consider buying an Ordinary Filmmaker baseball cap for $34.99 at ordinaryfilmmaker.com. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll see you again soon.